Hello, welcome back. Thanks for being here again today. And if it's your first time visiting, a very warm welcome. Today I want to talk about two words and their use over time in religious and spiritual movements. And the two words are meditation and contemplation. Now, in Eastern religions, there's not so much confusion about these two words. But in the Western tradition, especially in Christianity, over time, the usage of the words has changed, especially the word meditation. And so I want to take you to classic Christianity and let you know what to expect if you see that word there, and then also what the modern day usage would be, which you're probably familiar with. And then I also want to take you through the classic teaching about how to live a contemplative life, which in classic Christianity is pretty much reserved for monks and nuns, brothers and sisters, and to a certain extent to priests. Some priests became quite contemplative. So let me tell you about the words. The word meditation today, if I say to you I'm going to meditate or I practice meditation, you immediately think of, well, I'm going to sit in some kind of silence. And that is a practice that is intended to develop my spirit and bypass my thought life or my feelings or my bodily sensations and my memories and my expectations. It is a leaving behind of all of those things, at least that's the goal, and entering deeply into silence to hear and receive from divinity. So that's what I would be doing if I said I was going to meditate. It would be the same thing I would be doing if I said I was going to contemplate, that I practice contemplation. So in modern usage, meditation and contemplation, or meditate and contemplate, by modern writers for probably about the past 100 years, at least since the time of Thomas Merton, which was in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, at least since that time, this is the modern usage of the word meditation and contemplation. If you go back in history, the word meditation and saying I was going to meditate is classically known as discursive meditation. That means I'm going to think deeply about something. The 4 steps, or the 4 rungs of the ladder of the contemplative life, back in the day, probably the writings of, say, the 16th century and thereabout, this was spelled out as first reading. The first rung is reading, and that would be reading of either scriptures or reading of spiritual masters, of the previous mystics and teachers. And those you might select one to be your guide. This is the type of spiritual practice that I'm going to follow. In the modern day, up until today, a lot of Americans chose Thomas Merton. He was an extremely popular, well-known mystical teacher in the United States. If you're a Franciscan, the person you study and read would have been Saint Francis, etc. Some people see Saint Augustine from the 3rd century, or the 3rd and 4th century there, around that time, as their spiritual guide. So they read the writings of Augustine. So it's spiritual reading, it's slow reading, it is one verse, phrase, word at a time, and attempting to really understand what that sentence is saying. So it's not fast reading, it's not reading a whole book. It is a serious attempt at really understanding what the words could mean on all levels. And so that would have been the first level. And then you would take your thoughts and the images that come to you based on that scripture and meditate on them. That means you would think deeply about them. So that's how the word meditation is used. If you're reading something old, and sometimes when you're reading scriptures and you see the word meditate, it doesn't seem to be describing a sitting meditation like we describe today. It doesn't. It's describing thinking deeply, chewing on, so to speak, the words that you have read or the words that you've heard from a teacher. So someone reading the Gospels and then thinking about application and original meaning and all of the nuances of the words and the images that the parables would create, that would be called meditation. The next step would have been prayer, and these 3 steps are still used in religious work today. Reading, thinking about what we're reading, and we usually clump those 2 together in the term study, studying the word, learning the precepts of the word, attempting to apply them. Prayer then is, some people call it talking to God, and that's just what they do. They make their desires and requests and needs known to God, and then in intercession, the desires and needs of others known to God, whether it's people they know or don't know. And if they are a wise prayer warrior, they are listening for the wisdom of God. And then the 4th step in this 4-step or 4 rungs of the ladder to heaven, so to speak, are would be called contemplation. And that would be the sitting in silence, going deeper and deeper into the silence, bypassing all of those aspects of the false self that I mentioned before. And this is the term that we now say meditation. And this is where the mystics would have those amazing mystical experiences and consolations that they would write about during their contemplation. And still today, the term a contemplative life is applied. So now, if you're reading about, say, the life of a saint, or you're reading the words of a mystical teacher, you want to be aware of when it was written and whether they're using the words meditation and contemplation differently. Meditation meaning discursive, classical meditation, which is a lot of thinking, or they're talking about contemplation, sitting in deep silence, experiencing, seeking the experience of God. I put this out there as clarification because sometimes we misquote or misunderstand these writings, and I think it's helpful just to know what the words meant at the different times during the history of spirituality. So thanks again for watching, and I hope you can join with me again real soon, where we'll talk about another topic.